The NBA season is often home to some of the most intriguing stories in the world of sports. Every year, there's a small group of players and teams that manage to exceed all kinds of expectations and take the next step forward in their development. And even a season affected by a pandemic wouldn't be an exception to that. Among this season's surprise teams, there has been the Oklahoma City Thunder, an organization that started a rebuild by sending away almost all of its best players, but has managed to play better than anyone could have expected. That way, a season that was supposed to be full of difficult moments has suddenly turned into an exciting one, as the young players have thrived at leading a team of their own despite the lack of experience. Now they're in a weird situation as a playoff spot is starting to look like a realistic goal for them. But will they be able to get there? And most importantly, should they even try to do it? Let's talk about it. Last season, the Thunder were considered one of the most pleasant surprises in the league. Behind the leadership of Chris Paul, the team emerged as a playoff contender despite the low expectations. When everything was said and done, they came a few points away from making it to the second round of the playoffs. That run allowed the veterans to increase their value while also providing some of the younger players with an experience that would help them in their development. But OKC had spent the last few seasons in the middle of the pack and hadn't been able to make it out of the first round since 2016. So, even though CP3 and the other veterans helped provide an exciting season, the team knew it was time to start over again. That led to a series of moves during the offseason that sent Paul, Steven Adams, Danilo Gallinari, and Dennis Schroeder away, while also allowing them to free up their cap space, create multiple trade exceptions, and receive an outstanding haul of future draft selections through 2026. In other words, the Thunder's offseason was a huge success for the team's future. However, by tearing down the roster, the responsibility to lead the team on the court would fall on the shoulders of the young players, and especially on Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. So, with a revamped roster that consisted mostly of players who lacked any kind of experience leading a team and had barely even played with each other, expectations were very low. In fact, the team hired Mark Daigneault as the new head coach to develop the young players regardless of how many games they won together at first. On paper, the plan for this season looked very simple. Give most of your minutes to the young players and help them improve their game as the season progresses. Keep an eye on the players that may have the potential to become valuable pieces in the future, and hope that your record helps you receive a high lottery pick in the upcoming draft. So far, the first two items on that list have been going even better than expected. However, that has put them in a position where they're not looking exactly like a lottery team. Throughout the first 12 games of the season, the Thunder has an even record of 6 wins and 6 losses. That's far better than what was originally expected and would currently put them in a position to participate in the play-in tournament. Of course, there's still a lot of basketball to be played in the season, and the Western Conference remains as tough as ever. As things are currently standing, it looks like at least 14 teams in the West could compete to participate in the play-in, but that only makes what the Thunder has been doing even more impressive. They're the 6th youngest team in the league and have an average age of 24. None of their scoring leaders is over 22, and they have a rookie coach calling plays on the sidelines. Still, they're finding ways to compete and win games against more experienced teams. And even though there are new faces around, how this team wins games hasn't changed. Last season, OKC developed a reputation for playing strong against any team, and they often found a way to make a comeback and win close games. This time around, the team is 3-1 in games that have been decided in the clutch, and their most recent win came in overtime after overcoming a 22-point deficit against the Bulls. So things are looking pretty much the same, aren't they? Well, not exactly. Last year, the Thunder was one of the best defensive teams in the league. They finished 7th in defensive rating. And while their offense was not as impressive, it was good enough to help them win games. This time around, things aren't going that well for them. OKC ranks second to last in offensive rating, and its defense is now in the bottom half of the league. Wins have been coming by so far, but they may not be a reflection of the true identity of this team. Their net rating shows that. Last season, they finished with the 12th best net rating in the league, which coincided with how good they were. But this season, the team has the 3rd worst net rating in the league, and we only have to look at their results to find out why. Only one of their first 6 wins came against a team that currently has a winning record, and that was against a Nets squad that is still figuring things out. On top of that, they won half of those games by a margin of 3 points or less. In other words, it would have been very easy for the Thunder to be a 3-9 instead of 6-6 team. But another thing to take into consideration is their schedule. So far, they've played 6 times against teams that made the playoffs last year. And though most of those teams haven't looked like themselves during their early season, they only won 2 of those games. And then, when looking at their losses, there's one thing that stands out. Only one of their 6 losses was by less than 10 points. 2 of them were by at least 10 points, and the other 3 were each by at least 28 points. So half of their wins have come by a margin of 3 points or less, and half of their losses have come by a margin of 28 points or more. That's not how a winning team looks, and even less when we take into account they've yet to play a stretch of consecutive games against good teams. It may be a matter of time before their record starts looking a lot worse than it currently is, but things may not be that bad if that ends up being the case. First of all, the team has shown it can put a fight up against most teams, so even if the record eventually starts showing more losses, they shouldn't finish in the bottom of the standings. But whatever their record is at the end of the season, the plan was never to prioritize winning, and unless there's a drastic change in the coming weeks, that shouldn't change. The priority for this team is to develop its young players so they can win most of their games in the future. And even if their current record has taken most of the attention, the way they've been playing should be our main focus. While the defense hasn't been at its best, they've made it a priority to put a body in front of the ball and contest shots as often as they can. As a result, they've been leading the league in contested field goals per game. So they're doing their best to establish winning habits in the young players as they learn how to lead a team. In the end, that will allow them to compete against any team regardless of whether their shots are falling or not. But let's stop talking about the future for a minute and take a look at the way the young core has been performing so far. Among all the young players they've acquired, the four that have been making the biggest impact on the court are Shai, Le Guin Stort, Darius Bazley, and Hamidou Diallo. Naturally, Shai has been the one who stood out the most among his peers. He's taken another step forward in his development, and though the jump hasn't been as impressive, his points and assists averages have improved now that he's the best player on the team. With the ball in his hands more often, he's made the most of his chances by scoring career highs and sharing the ball among his teammates while also improving his shooting percentages from the field and long range. In short, he's becoming the leader the Thunders expect him to be. And while it's not clear whether he has superstar potential, he's the kind of player that knows how to embrace the moment and make everyone around him better. When it comes to Dort, he may easily be the second most popular player in the team after his impressive performance against James Harden and the Rockets in the first round of the playoffs. Back then, he made a name for himself as a strong defender who could trouble even scorers of the level of Harden. However, with a few exceptions, his offensive game left a lot to be desired, especially his shooting from long range. His scoring has almost doubled compared to last season, and his three-point shooting went from 29% to 43%. He's been slowly emerging as a solid 3-and-D player, and he recently joined the history books by becoming the third player in team history to post at least 20 points, 5 rebounds, and 5 steals in a game. For his part, Diallo has become one of the team's leaders off the bench. He's capable of providing energy to the second unit, and from time to time, he'll also put on an impressive performance of his own. In their win against the Nets, he and Shai became the first pair of Thunder teammates under 22 to score at least 25 points in the same game since Russell Westbrook and Kevin Durant. Last but not least, there's Bazley. Despite not having as many impressive performances as his teammates, Darius has been receiving the most minutes in the team behind Shai. The second-year player has emerged as one of the best defenders on the team and has often been assigned to guard star players like Jimmy Butler, Zion Williamson, and Kevin Durant. All in all, the Thunder seems to have found a core of young and skilled players capable of making an impact on both ends of the court. And while there weren't too many expectations on the team as the season got going, the youngsters have been a reason for optimism. Sound familiar? Over a decade ago, that's how OKC started building a championship contender. And even though it's highly unlikely history will repeat itself, we already know what Sam Presti is capable of doing, so it may only be a matter of time before we start looking at the Thunder as a contender once again. But now, do you believe they'll be able to compete for a spot in the play-in tournament, or are they still a few years away from playoff contention? Let us know in the comments. We hope you've enjoyed today's video, and if you did, remember to like it and subscribe to our channel for more NBA content. We are Courtside.